welcome back to the channel. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Maggie Snyder from Arise Mental Health Counseling. Maggie is a longtime friend of mine. We went to university together and she agreed to be my first interviewee for the YouTube channel. So thank you, Maggie, so much, and let's get into it.
So my name is Maggie Snyder. I work in Kearney, Nebraska and Holdridge, Nebraska. I primarily do in-person sessions, but I find it ironic that we're doing this telehealth session on a day that I changed all my clients to telehealth because of the weather.
Right?
So,
isn't that so convenient to be able to do that?
Yeah, the irony of it all. I'm full-time. I do 3 days in Kearney, 2 days in Holdridge. My expertise and specialty, it's kind of weird to be asked those questions because I don't know that I feel like I'm an expertise. But my specialty is basically meeting the client where they need to be met and sitting with them in it for a while until we can process and move forward in health.
Yeah, that's great. I think that that's definitely one of the key things being a therapist is meeting people where they're at and just being able to hold that space for them. Because a lot of times I find anyway that people just don't have anybody to listen and to sit with them in their crud. And we all have crud. So it's nice to just find that.
Well, and I don't know if you've ever had clients come in and like the second time they come in, like, I feel so much better. And I'm sitting here thinking, I didn't do anything. Like I didn't challenge you. I didn't talk to you. I didn't process. All you did. You're right. Most of the time they just need a place to vent and to not be judged and to have freedom and just to feel safe.
I would say I do feel that a lot. I do get that response a lot. And then it's after that when you start like kind of challenging or doing the work part that it's just so cool to watch people like, oh, I never thought of that, or those aha moments and stuff. It's so, I guess, a blessing to like be there and see that and go from like when you first meet them to when they've kind of blossomed a little bit.
Well, and some of them need the validation that, yeah, I could imagine you would be feeling that way based off what you just experienced, because I don't know about you, but growing up a lot of times you're told, it's fine, just get over it, just blah, blah, blah. And, okay, well, let's sit in it for a second, let's feel it, and then let's move on so we can understand what's really going on.
Definitely Nebraska, get your bootstraps and suck it up. And yeah, definitely not the healthiest way to process your feelings.
Right. You don't know what you don't know, right?
Well, I wonder, and maybe, I don't know, when we were in college, you used to talk about the military population and having a passion for that and trauma, I guess. So I'm kind of wondering if you have been able to do that in your actual practice or not, because I know sometimes it's hard to find those clients specifically, or if you're not with the VA or whatnot.
In Holdridge and Kearney, Nebraska, it's not, that big of a deal because we don't have any military bases. So it was kind of disappointing going through college. Yeah, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to help assimilate military back into civilian life after enduring military life for so long. I still have a passion for that. I've done some training. I do have a place in Seattle that I did some training. And they keep asking me, how many clients have I had over the past month? And how many family members have I had? And it's always been 0. So because I can't move what I'm doing, transitioning it over to trying to work with the police department in Kearney and Holdridge, and then moving on to fire. So basically just working with our service members. And so many of them I'm finding are really paranoid about seeking mental health because, what happens if something happens, people get called into the court and then records get subpoenaed,
Yes.
And it's unfortunate that there's such a fear out there. So I am running into that wall, basically a fear wall, in really trying to reach the clientele that I want to reach. But I am noticing that I am starting to see a lot more complex trauma clients. It's hugely gratifying to me to be able to, like we said earlier, sit with them and then help them process and kind of dissect one by one, because I think people get so stuck in that trauma and the processing gets blocked. And it's been it's weird to say, I was going to say a joy to work with these people, because it's not joy filled content by any stretch of the imagination, but just seeing them heal. And a lot of times they'll come in like, yeah, I don't feel like anything's happening. I'm like, "Wow, how cool is that you recognize that? Because last week you wouldn't have been able to recognize that, you know?" So it's celebrating those really small things of them becoming very intentional with themselves. So yeah, it started out military, and it's just because of where I live and my family, I haven't been able to move to an area where I can really hone in on that demographic. So
Yeah.
I'm adjusting.
Well, and I think that's interesting because yes, we don't like being hard to get into that military population, but then also finding that the trauma piece that is intriguing. I am into trauma, that's my specialty. So I think that you can find that in rural Nebraska a lot easier than I thought. I thought it was going to be a lot harder to find trauma. But it's everywhere. I'm glad that you were able to kind of find something that you like and have passion for, even if it's not particularly the demographic you were looking for.
So many people are worried about calling issues trauma because, like, oh, I haven't been in the service, I haven't hurt anybody, I haven't done this. But trauma is so individual to people, you know, and it happens in the blink of an eye. It happens even with a word that is said, you know. So it is everywhere, that's for sure.
Yeah, I've had that several times in practice where I'm telling someone, like, I really think that you are having trauma responses to these events you've experienced. And they're like baffled because they're not military. And then that education piece of like, well, it doesn't have to be war to be trauma. It can be a lot of things. And do you want to share a little bit about just your perception, I guess? Because I know you do like the in-person better, and I'm totally online all the time. So do you want to just talk a little bit about that and what you think about telehealth versus live and your experience with that, or how you feel your clients do? And
I think telehealth is amazing, and kudos to you for being able to do that 100% of the time, because I personally get distracted. So when I meet with clients, one of the first things I tell them, our therapists are not a one size fits all. You've got to find the therapist that really you connect with. And so I feel the same with in-person or telehealth. Not everybody, not every therapist, not every client appreciates in person, and not all of them appreciate telehealth. So I think you have to have that variety, again, just to meet the client where they need to be met. Me personally, telehealth, I do it for my clients who start with me in person and then move away. I've noticed that to be hugely beneficial, because I think there's great value for me in building an in-person relationship with them, so I can understand body language and idiosyncrasies in a different dynamic that I could have picked up all through telehealth. I recognize it's easier for me to start that relationship in person. So I work telehealth people who move, and then I also do telehealth on days like today where there's a snowstorm and I can't drive into work because it's a 40-minute drive. So I personally will try to do in person every chance I get. I do have a few people who start out telehealth because that makes them feel safer. And quite frankly, I'm not one of those therapists that want to keep people coming in my door. Like, I want to see them graduate and not need me. So if I feel that I'm not adequate enough telehealth wise, then I've got somebody like Katie that I can refer them to in your whole practice. And that's your forte. And I am so excited that you have that and that we have that referral resource.
yes, and I love that I know enough people across the state, yourself included, who, if people are more in your area and they want live, that
Yeah.
there's a network and resources, and therapists talk to each other. We definitely communicate and share, and it's whatever's best for the client.
Yes. Yes.
And I would say too, when I went from, because I used to do live in a group private practice before I started my own, and there were several people who I think in general that happens sometimes if you leave like clients who really are with you or in the middle of their work, they'll stay with you or whatever. But I did find that that was an easier switch, I think, for my clients that went from, oh, we used to meet live all the time to switching to telehealth was a lot simpler for them. And sometimes it is more difficult for someone to kind of warm up via telehealth if that's all if that's your first reaction with them.
With telehealth, sometimes it's strange because I can see you, I can see the client, but sometimes I just feel like there's when you're on the phone with somebody and you're talking over top of them and then the other person starts talking, oh, I'm sorry, you first, don't know what you first, but that kind of thing. And I think it's terribly awkward, and I don't know why in person that's here for me. But yeah, sometimes I just get hung up on stuff or stutter over something. And so I definitely think the choice between telehealth and in person is my safety, my security.
Well, some of your practices, right? Like the modalities, I guess is the word that you use, require in person or can be better done in person. Do you want to share about some of that?
I do want to share. I'm how to even open that door, Katie. So I do something called Splunknet, which is a faith-based process, and that involves having to be in person.
Well, and I was thinking the EMDR too. I kind of actually spaced the Splunknet, but that's a really good one. I thought I never had heard of it before. And I really do think, because I do get some people who are very in their faith and want that as part of their stuff, and I don't practice that way, so I usually end up referring them. So I think it's good to know that you do that, because some people really they look for that,
Well, I like to intermingle the Splunknet with like cognitive behavioral therapy or something, because the Splunknet, what it does is it really brings up talking points, and it brings up emotions that maybe you thought you processed, but there's actually blockages in the body. And so we need to figure out how to unblock that emotion, which then completely opens the door for additional conversation. EMDR, which can be done via telehealth. I had a couple of clients start with it and then move, and we've actually done it on telehealth, and it's been beneficial, but from their preference, they didn't really like it on telehealth. But yeah, so in person, it just feels more comfortable, I think, to do some EMDR, not to say that it can't be done. Again, it's personal preference.
Yeah, and I do EMDR telehealth, and I like it. My clients like it, and I do it live at the hospital so I have some people over there that do it, and we use the buzzy things. I think it's been comparable. I don't know. We'll see. And the longer I do it, maybe I'll change my mind. We'll have to see.
The longer you do it one way over the other, that's the way that's just gonna naturally become more comfortable for you.
Yeah. Well, I do them both. Like I have so many. I have like probably 3 or 4 people I do it with every week at it live at the hospital. And then I have 2 that I do telehealth every week. So I'm pretty split. It's interesting. So talk about a little bit, if you could, how you build rapport with your clients. What do you think are, I guess, your strengths, or what do you do, or what do you try with your office, or any of that you think helps build rapport with your clients?
How I build rapport with my clients. One, I start off immediately by giving them permission to not get along with me, so like there's so many people who are like, oh, I met this person, I have to like them, we have to get along, this is my therapist, period, end of story, no more searching. And so I start out by really just saying, hey, just so you know, I can be pretty blunt. I want to see progress, so I'm going to push you at times, I'm going to nurture you at times, and if that's just not something that you're really comfortable with, I want to empower you to be able to say, hey, we're not meshing, I think I need to find a different therapist. Honestly, I've had one person in my 5 years actually tell me that. Because what happens is people come to you if they're actually ready for help. They want help processing and they want to be challenged in their thinking a bit. So it's gone really good. And I think the first step in building the rapport is letting them know they have power in this relationship, letting them know that ultimately all these decisions are their decisions. And if they want to find somebody else, I'll help you find somebody. Just like you said, we have a huge amount of therapists out there and none of our personalities are the same. And that's okay. It's perfect. That's what we need. And then I really ask questions to get to know them. I tell them the first session isn't anything like a regular counseling session because I am asking questions, diving in, trying to understand who they are, where they come from, how they were raised, all these things, just to understand maybe some of their thought processes. And a lot of the times you'll ask one question and they'll take the rest of the 45 minutes answering it.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that because apparently that was the button that needed to be pushed in order to allow them to have that freedom and that speech that they needed to talk about. So people may think we kind of dictate and push and plan out sessions. There's so much freedom in my sessions that, okay, where do you want to go today? And how do we build this into the overall goal? Because we still need to make progress. We can't just sit there and talk for 45 minutes, you know, but basically it's, let's talk about what you need to get off your chest. And also how does that incorporate into our overall goal? So it's all processing and it's not necessarily just, you know, keeping them in the past of how's your relationship with your mom? How's your relationship with your dad? You know, it's like, you got stuff, heavy stuff going on right now too. So let's let you get that off your chest too.
I love that. Just ability to go where they need to go with it right off the bat. That's great. I love that. And I do like I'll get clients who they very much want like a structured, like, give me homework, tell me what to do. Let's do some worksheets or some practicing of strategies and skills. And like, that's just what they need at that time. But then the flexibility for, you know, people who are just like, they just need to be heard and whatever. And I think the same person can be one way at the beginning of treatment and then move into a different one. So yeah. Do you have, I guess, without breaking confidentiality, obviously, any special stories or significant, I don't know, moments or clients, I guess, or issues that you felt like just were really great and really impacted you as the therapist?
Yeah, I have one that stands out. She's kind of one of my long-term. Again, I don't try to get people in and out, you know, the assembly line type thing. I try to get people in and out because I want to empower them to move out on their own. So when I say the long term, like this is a complex trauma person and there's so many triggers and so many setbacks. Gosh, I think a year or two in to counseling, it was more like 2 years. I am starting to get really worried about, man, am I the right fit for this person? They've completely let their guard down. They're talking to me, but I'm not seeing progress. And like, I was getting hard on myself because there are very few clients that I blame for not making progress. Okay. A lot of times I take a lot of ownership. And with this one, I'm like, how do I do things differently? I started researching things. I started reaching out to other therapists saying, what would you do in these scenarios? You know, everything I could. And I kid you not, she shows up and she tells me a story. And she's like, this is how I handled it. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? How did you handle it? What did you do? And she actually put her foot down and spoke up. And I'm like, do you realize how awesome that is? She goes, what are you talking about? I just said what I wanted. I'm like, yes, but that's huge. Like I started celebrating and she's looking at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, oh, hallelujah. Like there's progress. And I just kind of slow my roll in that everybody heals at a different pace, especially with complex trauma, and to let them just naturally progress, stop pushing so much. Because honestly, especially if you have complex trauma, the more you push, the more it traumatizes the person. So, okay, let's, how do I adapt to that? And I think I've talked to you about this before. I have an athletic background. So, like, throughout my entire life, it's okay, this is my goal. This is what I need to do to win the game. What's the quickest route from point A to point B so that I can win the game? And people don't work that way. And it's retraining my brain to be like, see those small, awesome successes and celebrate that with them. So that was huge. I actually still see the person that's going on 3 years now, and like every time they come in and they're upset or sad or, oh, this was bad, this happened, and they tell me the outcome, I'm like, that's awesome. And they think I'm the weirdest thing ever, but oh.
I bet they love it. I bet it just makes them feel like so good to have you being like, good job, you did great, and to give them that praise, because sometimes a lot of times in therapy, that's where they get that validation, because the rest of the time they're just in it with themselves, right? They're not necessarily sharing their goals and what they're working on or what they're struggling with people in their lives. And the people in their lives are sometimes part of their problem. And so then when they're able to do that, you are sometimes the only person who knows that stuff and can even give them a pat on the back or a cheerleader moment. So that's great when you get to do that.
It is. I think that's the most satisfying part of being a therapist too, just seeing their success story.
So you said a little bit about having an athletic background, and this is not any of the questions I was going to ask you, but I also am now remembering that you have a whole different history. So do you want to share a bit about like what you used to do for a career, if you want, and how you got into what made you choose to switch your, I guess, career trajectory to mental health?
So my 2 boys, I have 2 stepsons, and I know they love me, but they also think I'm kind of crazy because I keep going back to school. So started out, man, I hated high school. I got out of there a year early, and I got an architectural drafting degree at the age of 19. And yeah, at that time, that was the same pay as an entry level anywhere else. So I wasn't making anything. I applied to a hospital, and I started out in the physical therapy department. And then I had some medical issues that I couldn't carry out my role, so I transferred over to admissions. And then from admissions, registering people in the computer system. A lot of my stuff has to do with computers. Registering them in the computer system, I went to the supervisor of the department. And then from there, I went to the trainer of Nebraska. And then from there, I went to the physician liaison for between physicians and IT. So I did a lot of IT stuff. And I tell you what, I feel like all those positions, especially the supervision and especially the liaison, it totally groomed me for being a therapist, because in those 2 roles, when people were so frustrated with either a patient they were admitting or the doctors were frustrated with IT, because, doctors think, and they are highly intelligent. Anybody watching this, don't be offended. They think they're the most intelligent ever. Well, then you've got IT who are really intelligent as well, and they think they're the most intelligent ever, and they just butt heads. So I'm standing in between these 2, trying to hold them back. And there was a lot of, okay, well, let me just listen to you then. Just let it all out there. And I still have some doctors today who will contact me just to be like, oh, when are you coming back? I need more IT help. I'm like, I think you just want someone to talk to. So yeah, I did all that stuff for 16 years. And then I went back and I got my master's at the age of 38. So I've been doing it for a few years now. And it definitely, originally I did all those things because I had to make money and I had to put food on the table and I had to put a roof over our head. And it just seemed like a natural progression. And because I am really competitive, I always, made myself take that step up and to not be afraid to keep moving up the ladder. And finally it got to the point where I'm like, why am I trying to move up this ladder? Because this job is not fulfilling in any way. And I get home at the end of the day, I'm like, what did I even do? I fixed somebody's hard drive. Like, okay, great. That's pretty expensive, but somebody else is out there who could do that. And I went through some personal stuff where I found a therapist, and it was good to talk, but I really needed to find somebody to challenge. And when you're in school for therapy, I remember the professors talking about, don't be afraid of silence. You know, sometimes it's really uncomfortable, but you have to sit in that silence a little bit to, you know, not try to fix stuff for other people, but to allow the client to process and start speaking up when they need to speak up. Well, this therapist I went to wasn't challenging. And I swear so again, in the beginning, it was really good because I was able to talk and say everything that I needed to say. But eventually got to the point where I'm like, okay, how do I challenge myself next? And then we would sit there because a question would be asked and I would answer it, matter of fact, and then we'd sit there in like 20 minutes of silence. And it was awkwardly looking around. Like I genuinely don't know what else, like my story's done. Challenge me some more, you know? And so at that point, I'm sitting there thinking, I could be one of those people to allow them to sit. And I have no problem with silence. We sit in silence a lot, but I know when it's time to challenge them and, you know, being able to pick up on the clients and how sometimes silence is good and sometimes silence is the time for challenging. So it's really all about the body language. And I just realized that I could help other people. And again, knowing that not everybody is a one size fits all. So I'm definitely not the therapist for 100% of people out there, but I'm the therapist for somebody like me who wants that challenge and also that nurturing.
Yes. I just love that. It speaks to like so many different areas because, you know, as I'm doing like the business side of stuff, you hear a lot like solve your own problem and then sell the solution to other people. And that's like a good business model or whatever. And I think like, that's like what you did is you went and you had a problem, you sought a solution. And then when you found a gap in your experience and how you felt about that, and then you went and educated yourself and became what you needed. And so now you are what you needed for someone else. That's awesome.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also think it's so cool that like you come from IT and all these different things. Like, so if anybody out there is like, oh, I want to be a therapist, but I don't know, doing physical therapy right now or whatever, like you can always switch, come to our side.
Honestly, I think it's great when we have traditional age students going through the program, but I think there are some people who need those life experiences. And a lot of the clients I've had come to me needing to talk to somebody who's had life experiences. Like you can't just read from a book and, oh, here's this theory and this is how I do this modality and like very structured. You got to be flexible. It's not one size fits all. It's a great modality, but you also have to adapt it so that I can execute it well and that many different types of clients can receive it.
I remember in college, there were traditional aged students who had expressed concern about being therapists for older people. And I even felt that way a little bit because I wasn't like traditional, but I wasn't super off of traditional age. I was like 4 years after. And I used to think like, oh man, if I get like someone in their 50s in my office, like, why are they going to listen to some like 30-year-old or whatever telling them something about life? But I do think it's not really about that. It's not about your age or whatever. But I would say some people, it very much is, if you're really young and their problem is something that is not anything you would have had any experience with, it's kind of hard. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, you don't have to, have certain things happen to you to be able to treat people for those issues either. So that's a very interesting dynamic. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, and also understanding that you may not be the best fit for everybody and being okay It is nothing personal whatsoever.
Right.
And for those students, we need young therapists out there. That's totally awesome. They're recognizing, okay, this person's body language, they're kind of shut down, they're maybe short with me, or, you know, whatever, just understanding, you know, you being able to say, I don't feel like we're the best fit. Let's find a therapist who really connects with you, you know? So you need that wide range of ages to be able to do that, because quite frankly, college students may not want to come in and talk to an old person. So we need those younger.
Yes, true. Okay, well, we are going to get cut off in like 3 minutes. So are there any final thoughts or advice for people considering the mental health field, or people who are looking for therapists, that you would give? And then also share your practice again, I guess, and where you're at and where people can reach you.
Okay, so one of the things that I would tell clients is, when you go in, and this has to do with any type of professional, I've had a lot of people really nervous about finding a doctor, a mental health therapist, anybody, and being worried about them being judged and them not fitting what I need. And what I want to tell them is that you should come to us with a list of questions, because I want you to treat it like an interview as well. I want you to make sure you're advocating for yourself, and that you, at a pretty young age, you kind of understand what personalities click with you well. And it is okay to ask questions. And if you're with a doctor, a physical therapist, a mental health therapist, anybody who gets offended by it, maybe find somebody else. And I don't want you to just quit after the first one. I want you to keep fighting and advocating for yourself and finding the fit that works for you, because you will find that person. So don't think it's just a one and done thing. And even if you have a therapist that works really good for one goal or one issue, and they're not working for the second one, that's okay too. You know, find the one that works with the modality that you need in order for the healing that you're looking for. And so my office, I'll end with that. My office, I have one in Kearney and one in Holdridge, Nebraska, and you can reach both of those offices through the same phone number, 308-244-4131. Again, my name is Maggie, and I own Arise Mental Health Counseling.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you doing this for me.
Oh, I appreciate you doing this in general. This is awesome.
All right, have a good one. Bye-bye.